I promised this one to Marcelino. Marcelino sent me an email this morning to ask this question. So let me, one moment, folks. Let me just check here, make sure that we're still on live. So this was his question this morning. He asks, have you been able to negotiate rent prices and or add utilities in the rent? So questions. So there's like several questions here in this one question, right? Number one, have we been able to negotiate? Yes, all the time. We can very much negotiate with the landlord or with the seller for that matter, the price. Now, but there's a lot of factors involved. But just know that yes, we can negotiate prices down, and we have been able to. But there are factors involved to know if our negotiation will be successful. Number one, it depends on the demand and the supply. Supply and demand, right? It is a law of economics, just like the law of gravity. Just like we're always getting old, right? So anyway, so that's the law of the supply and demand. So if there is lesser supply and higher demand, then of course it's going to be hard for us to ask for a discount or for a lower rent, because the landlord knows, okay, in this case, because this is a landlord, right? This is a rent question. The landlord knows that if you're not going to get it, someone else will, because there's so many tenants looking for good homes right now. So that is one thing that we have to consider. It depends on the supply and demand. So we are going to look at the market and see how fast these homes are moving, and then see how many homes in Anderson Air Force Base at 2450 that's fully gated with 4-bedroom. Let's see how many of those are available. So like if there's none available, then you know that it's going to be hard for us to negotiate that, because there's a lot of folks that are looking for fully gated 4-bedroom homes. And so the demand is going to be high. So if the demand is high, supply is low, it's going to be hard to negotiate. Another thing too is competition. I already alluded to this earlier. If there's a lot of you looking at this home, then the landlord will pick the highest bidder, or who is going to give the best terms, the best offer. So again, it depends on competition. Another thing also to consider is days on the market. If the house has been in the market for more than 30 days, 60 days, then we have more negotiating power, because that means that the house has been sitting empty, the landlord has been paying mortgage and not receiving any rent. So then we are in a better position to negotiate. But if that house just days on the market, 1, 2, 7, even 15, it's going to be harder to negotiate, because the landlord is still willing to wait for the right price. So those are the things that we need to consider. Now, what if though there's a house that you really like, but it's more than your OHA, it's more than your housing allowance? So let's say, for example, there's a house that you like that's for $2,500, but your OHA is $2,450, and then we can't negotiate it down, right? Because again, there is more demand, there is more competition, and it was just in the market yesterday. So here's what happens: we can't negotiate the rent price down, but you have your OHA of $2,450, assuming that you're accompanied, right? And then you have to cover that $50 difference. A lot of folks, what they do is they tap into their utility allowance. Depending on if you're single or family, you do have utility allowance. So for a family, you have 900, I think 75 it was. You can get that on the OHA calculator, and you can check that also on our website, how much your utility allowance will be. So anyway, you can tap into that $50 that you need to cover that rent. You can tap into your utility allowance. Okay, so just know that you're not limited to just $2,450. Okay, so that's something that you need to open your mind to, in case you see something that you really like and it's above your OHA. Don't shoot it down right away. Don't scratch that off your list. You got to ask yourself, am I willing to tap into my utility allowance to get this house? okay, or to beat the competition. So let's say, for example, you know that there's a whole bunch of you competing for this house. If you want to beat out the competition, you might even need to offer more than 2,500. You might want to offer 2,550 or 2,600. But you know, it's $150 over your OHA. Where are you going to get that? You can get that from your utility allowance. So just know that you do have some leeway because of that utility allowance. Now, with that being said, I want to answer the second part of Marcelino's question. Can you add utilities? Okay, please know that you get an OHA allowance and you get a utility allowance and you get a MIHA, but that's a different story. So you get a OHA, that's use it or lose it. So even if you get a house that's $2,000, you do not get to keep the $450 if your OHA is $2,450, right? So it's a use it or lose it. And you have your utility allowance of 900 something. I should have prepared to get the more accurate number for you, but I know it's 900 something. Now, if you add, let's say for example, you get a house and it's $2,450 and you want to negotiate to have power or water included, when housing or your command finds out that your utility is included in the rent, you will not get your 900 something utility allowance. Okay, you are waiving it. You're saying, I don't want it because I want it included in my rent. Now that is not a good idea, because whatever is left over from your utility allowance, you get to keep, you get to save. So that's why it's not recommended. I wouldn't, none of my clients, I never say this, that you have, you know, power and water included, because once you do that, then you are no longer, you will no longer be entitled to your utility allowance. So you're basically saying bye-bye 900 something dollars. Okay, so I hope that answered your question. And folks, I always encourage my clients, the ones that we're helping, the ones we're in communication with, or those of you who are watching us, please feel free to ask your questions. And if sometimes I will answer it, you know, it's easier for me to just do a video and answer it on WhatsApp or something audio. And then if it's really a frequently asked question, it's a very relevant question like this one of Marcelino. Thank you so much for asking that and allowing me to share it here on the Facebook page. You know, if it's very, it's a frequently asked question, then I will feature it here.